Today, China stands as the undisputed leader in the global automotive industry. In 2023, more than half of all electric vehicles in the world were manufactured in China. Companies like BYD, Geely, and NIO are not just competing with giants like Tesla. They are setting global trends in innovation, design, and affordability. Yet just a few decades ago, China was not even capable of mass-producing passenger cars. How did the country achieve this remarkable transformation? From the first factories, built with Soviet assistance in the 1950s, to becoming a global leader in electric vehicles and cutting-edge technology, the history of China's automotive industry is a story of ambition, determination, and extraordinary progress. We'll explore every stage, from the industry's birth following the establishment of the People's Republic of China, through the economic reforms of the 1980s, to today's dominance in global markets. You'll discover how China not only caught up with the West, but in many areas surpassed it. The history of China's automotive industry begins during challenging times. After the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949 under Mao Zedong, the country faced severe economic hardships. Most industries were in their infancy, and there was no automotive sector to speak of. To develop this industry, China turned to the Soviet Union for assistance, as the two nations had established friendly relations at the time. In 1953, with Soviet support, the first automobile works, FRW, was established in the city of Changchun. This factory became a symbol of China's initial steps toward building its own automotive industry. In 1956, FAW rolled out its first Chinese truck, the Jifang CA-10, a copy of the Soviet ZIS 150. It was a simple yet reliable vehicle designed to withstand harsh operating conditions. The truck became the backbone of the country's transportation infrastructure, heavily used in the military, industry, and construction. The Jifang marked the beginning of mass automobile production in China. However, during this period, the automotive industry was focused exclusively on serving the state's needs. Passenger cars were nearly non-existent. In 1958, China introduced its first luxury car brand, Hongqi Red Flag, specifically designed for the political elite. These vehicles symbolized power and prestige and were used to serve high-ranking officials, including Mao Zedong himself. It's worth noting that Hongqi cars were practically handmade, and their production was extremely limited. They were more of a demonstration project than a mass production effort. Thus, during the 1940s and 1950s, China's automotive industry was in its infancy. The primary focus was on building basic infrastructure, training skilled workers, and producing commercial vehicles. The entire industry was closely tied to the state's needs, and the idea of automobiles being accessible to ordinary citizens was still a distant dream. The 1960s and 1970s were a challenging time for China's automotive industry. Following the Sino-Soviet split in the early 1960s, China lost access to the Soviet expertise and technical support that had been instrumental in its early automotive efforts. Isolated from much of the world, the country faced significant difficulties in advancing its automotive sector. During this time, China's focus remained on producing trucks, buses, and other commercial vehicles to support its infrastructure and industrial needs. The demand for passenger cars was minimal, and such vehicles were reserved exclusively for the political elite. Cars like the Hongqi remained symbols of power but were produced in very small quantities. For most of the population, transportation was dominated by bicycles and trains. The Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, further disrupted industrial progress. Factories across China, including automotive plants, were often repurposed for other uses, and many skilled workers and engineers were sent to rural areas for ideological re-education. This significantly slowed technological development and production capacity. Despite the overall stagnation, some modest progress was made. China attempted to develop its own automotive technologies without relying on foreign assistance. For example, several regional factories began producing basic utility vehicles and military transport. However, these efforts were limited in scale and innovation. By the end of the 1970s, the Chinese automotive industry was still far behind the rest of the world. The focus remained on meeting the needs of the state and military, with no real push toward developing a consumer market for automobiles. In summary, the 1960s and 1970s were marked by isolation, stagnation, and a lack of technological advancement. While China managed to sustain a basic level of automotive production, it would take significant economic and political reforms in the next decade to spark real growth and innovation in the industry. The 1980s marked a turning point for China's automotive industry. With Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms and the opening of China's markets, the country began to transition from a centrally planned economy to one that embraced market-oriented policies. This shift brought new opportunities for the development of the automotive sector, including foreign investments and the introduction of joint ventures with international automakers. One of the most significant milestones of this era was the establishment of joint ventures between Chinese state-owned enterprises and foreign automakers. In 1984, SAIC Motor partnered with Volkswagen to form the first major joint venture in China's automotive history, SAIC Volkswagen. This partnership introduced the iconic Volkswagen Santana, a reliable and affordable sedan that quickly gained popularity among Chinese consumers. The Santana became a symbol of modernization and a stepping stone for China's automotive aspirations. Shortly after, other joint ventures followed. Beijing Jeep, a collaboration with American Motors Corporation, was founded in 1984, focusing on the production of SUVs. These early collaborations were instrumental in bringing modern production methods, technology, and management practices to Chinese factories. While automobiles were still considered a luxury item during the 1980s, the reforms began to stimulate domestic demand. Rising incomes in urban areas and a growing middle class created a new market for private vehicles. Although bicycles and public transportation still dominated, owning a car became a symbol of status and economic progress. During this period, China laid the groundwork for the automotive industry's future growth. Modern factories were built, engineers and technicians were trained, and the country gained access to foreign technologies. Although most cars produced during this time were based on foreign designs, China began to acquire the skills and knowledge necessary to develop its own vehicles in the coming decades. The 1990s was a transformative decade for China's automotive industry. With economic reforms gaining momentum and a growing middle class, the demand for passenger vehicles began to surge. This era was marked by significant advancements in production, foreign partnerships, and the gradual emergence of domestic brands that would eventually compete on the global stage. By the 1990s, joint ventures became a cornerstone of China's automotive strategy. Companies like FAW Volkswagen, established in 1991, and Guangzhou Honda, launched in 1998, brought a wide range of modern vehicles to Chinese consumers. These partnerships introduced global best practices in manufacturing, quality control, and marketing. Vehicles such as the Volkswagen Jetta and Honda Accord became household names, solidifying foreign brands' dominance in the Chinese market. Joint ventures not only provided China with access to advanced technologies, but also trained a new generation of engineers, technicians, and managers. However, critics often pointed out that Chinese partners in these ventures played a subordinate role, primarily assembling vehicles designed and engineered abroad. This limited their ability to develop their own intellectual property. While joint ventures dominated the market, the 1990s also saw the first serious efforts by domestic automakers to carve out their place in the industry. Companies like Geely and Chery were founded during this time, marking the beginning of China's independent automotive ambitions. Initially, these brands focused on producing affordable and practical cars for the growing domestic market. Their vehicles were often basic and less sophisticated than foreign models, but they were significantly cheaper, making them accessible to more Chinese consumers. The Chinese government continued to play a pivotal role in shaping the automotive sector. Policies were implemented to encourage the growth of domestic brands while maintaining strict control over joint ventures. For example, foreign automakers were required to partner with Chinese companies and could not own more than 50% of the joint venture. Additionally, the government invested heavily in infrastructure development, building roads and highways to support the increasing number of vehicles on the streets. These improvements not only boosted car sales, but also laid the groundwork for future economic expansion. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Domestic brands struggled to compete with the quality and reputation of foreign vehicles. Additionally, joint ventures often limited the transfer of core technologies, leaving Chinese automakers dependent on their foreign partners. The rapid urbanization and increasing car ownership also led to new problems, such as traffic congestion and air pollution, which would become major issues in the years to come. By the end of the 1990s, China's automotive industry had made significant strides toward modernization. Joint ventures had brought advanced technologies and manufacturing practices, while domestic brands began to establish themselves as serious players in the market. By the 2010s, Chinese automakers were no longer content to remain regional players. Companies like Geely, BYD, and Great Wall Motors began aggressively pursuing international markets. Geely's acquisition of Swedish automaker Volvo in 2010 was a pivotal moment, showcasing China's ability to expand globally and absorb international expertise. This partnership not only elevated Geely's status, but also introduced Volvo's technology and design to the Chinese market. As the 2000s unfolded, China solidified its position as a global automotive powerhouse. The focus shifted towards full electrification of transport, autonomous driving, and exporting Chinese vehicles to developed markets. Companies like BYD, NIO, and Geely began competing successfully with global giants, offering high-tech, stylish electric vehicles. Chinese automakers expanded to markets in Europe, Australia, and even North America, showcasing their commitment to quality and innovation. This has been the incredible journey of China's automotive industry, from its humble beginnings in the 1940s to becoming a global leader today. Let us know in the comments what you think about the future of China's automotive industry. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.